I still remember the taste of rain mixed with dust when I pressed my face against the cold pavement at night. At 12, I learned the grammar of sidewalks, the way a drain could be a pillow if you curled into yourself, the way cardboard could become a kingdom if you pretended enough. I used to count the seconds between headlights and imagine they were angels or trains to some other life. Mostly, I imagined nothing at all. Nothing was safer. Shelters were the in-between, not quite hell, not quite rest. I slept with my sneakers tied to my wrists by their laces, because waking up barefoot meant starting from less than zero. I learned to gauge a man by his cough, a woman by the set of her shoulders, a guard by the tired tilt of his chin. I learned how insults can bruise deeper than fists, and how pity can be the cruelest punchline. 3. People looked through me like a window somebody forgot to wash. I became good at not existing. A trick: if you don't breathe too loud, they don't see you. If you don't ask, they won't lie. At night, when the streets softened and the city exhaled, I spoke to the dark. I didn't know if God lived there, but I hoped he could hear past my cracked voice. If you're there, I'd whisper, teach me not to disappear. 4. By 24, I was tired the way rust is tired. The shelter manager said my time was up, and I left with a plastic sack of nothing special and a headache that tasted like metal. I tried one more job at a loading dock, got laughed out of the room for the smell of rain and alley on my clothes. I had never felt so invisible and so exposed at the same time. 5. Then a man stopped, not to scold me, not to preach. He asked my name like he intended to remember it. He held out his hand like a small, bright bridge. He said there was work, real work, and that he owned more trucks than I had fingers to count. He said something about second chances and the one who hands them out. And that was the first time I felt the pavement give way beneath me in a good way, like the ground itself had decided not to swallow me whole. They called me Lucas on the streets because my real name felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. The city was São Paulo, though some nights it felt like 20 cities stacked on top of each other, one for the rich, one for the tired, one for the furtive shadows, and one for the boys like me who grew into men without once being called son. I had drifted between shelters since 12, picking up odd jobs, hauling crates, sweeping warehouses, running errands that sometimes weren't errands at all. I kept a mental map of places that didn't throw rocks, and a list of faces that didn't sneer. When I met him, Daniel Ribeiro, he wasn't wearing a halo, just a navy jacket and a face that looked like it had weathered both victory and loss. He owned a multinational logistics company, the kind that stitched continents together with routes and schedules. He said he needed a pair of hands willing to learn. I wanted to say mine were just tired, but I took the bus token he offered and sat by the window with both palms open, like catching a small sun. Trust is a muscle I hadn't used in years. It ached when I lifted it. I told myself it was another false door, and I was the fool rehearsing hope in the hallway. Still, that night I slept behind the church steps and murmured a thank you to the air. A stray dog pressed its back against mine for warmth. Maybe that was an answer. Maybe I was just cold. If you're listening to this, and you've ever felt like a smudge in someone else's day, stay with me. There's more road ahead than we can see from the curb. Before we dive in, would you support this channel? Please subscribe, hit like, and leave a comment. Tell me which moment hit you hardest, and share your city and country. I read them on quiet nights like prayer beads. The last shelter I stayed in was painted a tired blue that peeled like old skin. The manager had a whistle he wore like authority, and a clipboard he used like a weapon. Rotation, he said. Eyes on the list. 30 days, you've had 45. His voice made me feel like a stain spreading. I packed my plastic bag, 2 shirts that refused to be clean, a cracked cell phone with no SIM, a book I couldn't finish. I tried to keep my face blank. Blankness was my armor. I stepped into the morning and it clung to me, a wet, grey heat that made everything heavy. I walked to the market behind the bus terminal, where the vendors threw away more than I had ever owned. I waited for the bananas with brown freckles to be tossed in a bin. A boy younger than me tried to grab the same bunch. We both froze. I let go first. He whispered "obrigado" and ran. A swallow of pride burned its way down, but it didn't choke me. Not this time. Humiliation grew ordinary, the way a scar becomes landscape. At a small bakery job I lasted 2 days before the baker's son laughed, pinching his nose. Smells like gutter. I wanted to say the gutter smelled like me, like survival and mold and rain, but Words are dangerous when your whole life can be erased by a nod. I left quietly, hands steady, rage folded small inside my ribs. Nights were loud. Fights over blankets. Arguments over who saw the corner first. A woman with a voice like sandpaper sang old hymns, and the melody made me pine for something I had no memory of. I slept against a wall warm from the day's sun, and I dreamed of a steering wheel I had never driven. But in the dream, the wheel answered to my hands like a living thing. When the manager finally set out, there was no pretense of kindness. Next, he barked, like I was a number that had run out. I walked away and didn't look back, because looking back makes you small. I passed a church and sat on the steps, head down, the city's traffic like a far-off ocean. If you're there, I breathed. I can't do this much longer. I'm not bargaining. I'm just saying what's true. I think now that a prayer is less a letter and more a pulse, something you send because you must, not because you expect reply mail. The day and I counted coins, enough for bus fare, not enough for food. Hunger had its own clock in me, ticking. The multinational headquarters sat on an avenue whose sidewalks never cracked. I didn't go there, not yet. I hovered near the loading bays of smaller warehouses, offering my back like a rented animal. "We don't hire off the street," one foreman said, lip curled. Another pretended not to hear. I held my plastic bag tighter, like proof that I had at least one thing you couldn't take. The encounter happened ordinary. A navy jacket, shoes that had walked places I could not imagine. "You looking for work?" the man asked. I stared at his hands, broad, open, unarmed. "I don't have an address," I said, like confession. "What I care about is if you have a name and if you'll show up." He answered. It sounded like a door unlatching. "Lucas," I said. It came out hoarse, like I hadn't used it in years. He nodded. "Daniel." He handed me a card, a bus token, and the kind of gaze that doesn't scrape. Then he did something strange. He paused, as if listening to something I couldn't hear, and said softly, "There's more mercy in this world than we think." He didn't quote chapter or verse, just that. It hung in the air like a bridge. That night, the dog found me again and lay across my feet. I watched the stars shoulder their way through the cloud ceiling. I said, "I'll try," to no one. It felt like both promise and plea. The next morning I arrived early, stomach hollow, palms damp. The lobby of Ribeiro Logistics was all gleam and glass, the sort of space that made me conscious of every threadbare place on my clothes. A receptionist with perfect nails looked at me like a problem to be solved or escorted out. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked. I held up the card, Daniel's name glowing like a rescue flare. She blinked, made a call, and then stood. "Mr. Ribeiro will see you." Daniel's office didn't look like a king's throne. Books, maps pinned with colored flags, a window the size of a movie screen framing the bruised blue outline of the city. He offered me water. I drank like a man afraid it would be taken back. "Here's the deal," he said. "We start you on the loading docks. 2 weeks probation, showers in the basement, clean work gear, a locker. You don't need to prove your past to me. Just show me tomorrow." He handed me a uniform navy like his jacket hand. I held it with both hands, the way I once held a donated blanket in winter. "I don't have papers," I said. He watched me carefully. "We'll sort what can be sorted. Legally, it might take time. Meanwhile, your name is enough to begin. Everyone starts somewhere." He did not flinch away from my smell or my history. He did not lean too close either. Respect isn't charity. It's room to stand. On the dock, noise was king forklifts beeping, pallets thudding, voices calling codes that sounded like a secret language. A man named Jairo showed me how to scan boxes, how to strap a load so it traveled straight. He didn't smile. "You drop it, you own it," he said. Another worker, skinny and sharp-tongued, laughed as I fumbled the first strap. "Street boys' hands shake," he said. "Maybe afraid of soap. Laughter has a way of finding buddies." I said nothing. Silence can be a kind of dignity if you hold it right. I ran box after box until my arms hummed. Sweat rinsed me. By noon, I had forgotten to be ashamed. The rhythm of work is its own music, and I could finally stay on beat. At lunch, I sat outside on the loading ramp, sharing shade with a stack of crates. I ate a sandwich from the company cafeteria, every bite a surprise. Daniel came by like a passerby, leaned on the railing. "First mornings are always the tallest mountain," he said. "Tomorrow it'll be a hill." I nodded. He glanced at my hands. "You've got a careful grip." That's good for cargo. It changes people's days when their stuff arrives safe. We do more than move boxes. We deliver on trust. That evening, I stood under the basement shower and watched a small river of city flow off medust, sweat, the old smell I'd worn like a second skin. I thought about how water breaks over stone for 1,000 years, and the stone gives way at last. I thought about how someone made room for me to step into clean. When I lay on the cot in the company's shelter unit, temporary housing for workers who needed it, I whispered, "Thank you," into the darkness. 2 words, no fireworks. My chest felt less like a locked room. Sleep came quickly, soft as a blanket unfolded by careful hands. Day 2, day 3, my body learned the choreography. Scan, lift, strap, mark. Jairo grunted in ways that might have been approval. The sharp-tongued guy, Osvaldo, kept up his jokes, but they bounced off me more often. I was busy building a small, quiet life inside my chest. Arrive, work, wash, sleep. On Friday, Daniel stopped me as the shift ended. "Come by Monday before your shift," he said. "I want to show you something." His eyes held a question I didn't know how to answer. I said, "Okay," and the word felt like stepping from one stone to the next in a fast river. Balance, breath, forward. That night, walking back to the cot, I passed the company chapel, just a simple room with chairs and a wooden cross. No candles, only a window where the last light of day pooled on the floor. I stepped inside, sat at the back. "I don't know how to do this," I said to the empty room. "I don't know what you want from me, but I'm listening." The quiet didn't answer in words. My pulse slowed. Sometimes that's answer enough. Monday began with a misstep. I misread a dock number and sent a pallet to the wrong truck. It was expensive medical equipment bound for a hospital. By the time we caught it, the truck was halfway to Campinas. Jairo's face went stone. Osvaldo grinned like a hyena. "Street boy nearly costs us clients," he crowed. My throat went dry. Shame rose like heat. Daniel arrived before I could drown. He didn't shout. He asked for a timeline, a fix. Jairo arranged a redirect, a driver swap, a fresh set of papers. The operation turned like a wheel, precisely because the man in charge had built it for mistakes to be survivable. When it was done, Daniel asked me to walk. We stood by the edge of the loading bay where the air had space. "I won't lie to you," he said. "This could have hurt us, but you caught it, and you told the truth. That matters more than a perfect record." I stared at my boots. He continued, "We're dealing with trust here. Clients, patients, people. We'll train you better. You'll make fewer mistakes, and when you do, you'll own them. That's leadership, not just labor." He spoke the word leadership like a possibility, not a joke. I felt something shift under my ribs. "I've never been good at being seen," I said, surprised at the words falling out. "It makes me feel like falling." He nodded. "Being seen is a kind of falling, but there's landing too. And there's the one who catches." Training intensified. I learned codes, routes, the logic of the inventory system. Numbers began to behave. I studied at night, under the dorm's flickering light. Osvaldo tried to trip me during a shift change by moving a tag. Jairo caught it and barked his name. The sound a sharp slap. That was the day Osvaldo stopped laughing at me and started ignoring me, which felt like graduating. One afternoon, Daniel asked me to sit in on a meeting, driver's dispatch, client services. I watched how he asked questions, how he listened until the answers were true. I noticed he praised in specifics and corrected in private. When a driver spoke about a difficult route, Daniel drew a map, arrows looping like a patient teacher's handwriting. "Our work serves real lives," he said. "Let's remember the human weight of what we move." I carried that sentence like a stone that warmed in the hand. That week, I caught 2 minor errors before they bloomed into disasters. Daniel didn't throw me a parade. He nodded once and said, "Good eyes." Then he handed me a paperback on logistics and leadership. The margins were full of his notes, small arrows and questions. "Write your answers in pencil," he said. "We'll go over them." In the chapel, I sat more often, not to impress anyone. No one noticed me there, but because the silence felt like oxygen. My prayers were clumsy, like learning a new language. "Thank you for the day," I said. "For the chance, for the hands." Sometimes I added, "I'm still afraid." It felt honest. Honesty felt like a path. The first paycheck I received was a small miracle printed in ink. I bought socks, a second-hand backpack, a toothbrush that felt like wealth. I saved the rest with a fierceness that startled me. Money wasn't safety yet, but it was a tool. I looked at my locker with my name on it. Just Lucasen felt something tighten and then loosen, the way a knot gives. On Friday, Daniel invited me for coffee in the cafeteria. "You learn fast," he said. "What do you want, Lucas?" "Not next week. 5 years." My mind stalled, like a truck on a hill. No one had asked me that before. "I want to drive," I said at last. It surprised me, and maybe, lead, help build routes that make sense. Saying it made it real. Daniel smiled in a way that wasn't patronizing. "Then that's the map." That night, I returned to the chapel and sat in the same chair, a few rows from the back. I thought of the cross on the wall, simple wood against white. I felt gratitude rise, not like a geyser but like a steady spring. "You kept me when I was ready to disappear," I said softly. "Teach me to keep others." Daniel became more than a boss. He became a mentor with a careful hand. He didn't fix my life. He taught me how to fix my day. "Systems," he said, tapping the whiteboard. "Humans fail. Systems catch." He showed me how the company planned routes to save fuel, how they negotiated with port authorities, how a delayed shipment in Santos could ripple all the way to a pharmacy in Manaus. I realized logistics was a language, and I was becoming literate. He also talked about values without turning the room into a sermon. "If we say every person matters," he said, "then the temp worker on nights matters as much as the client who pays the bill. God doesn't do VIP lines." He smiled when he said it, like a private joke with heaven. I tucked the words into my pocket and checked on them during breaks. Prejudice didn't vanish. At a supplier's office downtown, I waited to sign for a shipment. A man in a slick suit looked me up and down, wrinkled his nose. "Your company hires anyone, huh?" he said. I swallowed the old fire that licked at my throat. "My company hires people who learn," I answered. "Sir," I added the last word like a hinge. He shrugged, handed me the clipboard. Disdain is a language too. I chose not to be fluent. One rainy afternoon, a truck slid on an oil-slick ramp and kissed a concrete pillar. No one was hurt, but the cargo glass lab equipment shivered into expensive shards. I was part of the response team. My hands shook as we assessed the damage. I felt the old panic returning, that drowning sense. Daniel arrived, calm boreal. He kneeled to my level, eyes steady. "Head up," he said. "This is a storm, not the ocean. We stand, we rebuild." We wrote reports late into the evening. I expected anger. I got a plan. Replace, reroute, re-earn trust. Daniel placed his hand briefly on my shoulder, a gesture that felt like both reassurance and commissioning. Later, I saw him in the chapel, head bowed, no theatrics, just quiet. I stood in the doorway, not to intrude, but to learn the shape of humility. In time, he let me shadow client calls. I watched how he owned mistakes we made and never used the word they when he meant my team. He showed me charts of margins and costs, taught me to read the skeleton of a balance sheet. "If you ever want your own company," he said once, like it was a normal thing to say to a former street kid, "you must love numbers and names equally." Evenings, I enrolled in night courses, counting basics, fleet management, a class on entrepreneurship at the community center. I did assignments at a small desk in the dorm, the wood scarred by other men's dreams. Some nights I fell asleep over ledgers. When I woke to the dawn smearing pale light on the window, I felt a steady fire at my core. Not anger anymore. Drive. I made my share of smaller mistakes, misfiled paperwork, a call returned too late, a driver's schedule that clashed with school pickups and created a human mess. Each time, I learned the lesson without letting shame become my teacher. Shame is a poor professor. It only teaches you to hide. Daniel's method was different. Correct quickly, repair relationships, move on with a note in the playbook. One Sunday, I found a small church tucked behind a hardware store. No fancy lighting, just voices that rose imperfect and true. I stood at the back, hat in my hands like the men in my grandfather's stories maybe my mind invented to keep me company. The pastor spoke about a shepherd who leaves the 99 to find the one. He didn't quote long, he just told it like news. I felt the room tilt. "Is it possible you came to the sidewalk for me?" I asked inside. The answer wasn't thunder. It was a quiet warmth that made me stand a little taller. After service, an old woman pressed a small wooden cross into my palm. "For your pocket," she said. "Not to protect you, but to remind you." I didn't believe in lucky charms. I did believe in remembering. I carried it thereafter, smooth and light, like a compass you feel more than see. The year we scaled from 30 to 60 drivers felt like speeding uphill with a full load, thrilling, loud, and one wrong shift from stalling. Our biggest hospital client scheduled a renewal audit, 6 weeks of route checks, cold chain logs, punctuality metrics. If we passed, we'd double our coverage. If we failed, we'd shrink overnight. I told the team this wasn't about survival. It was about serving people who couldn't afford our mistakes. They nodded, fired up. I slept lighter. We'd brought on a gifted dispatcher named Thiago. Sharp eyes, steady hands, the kind of calm you want when radios crackle. He came from a story like mine, a shelter kid who'd learned to map chaos. I liked him instantly. He learned our routes in days, remembered drivers, kids' names in weeks. When he asked for more responsibility, I said yes, with the joy of recognizing a mirror that doesn't scare you. 2 nights before the audit window, the cold room temperature alarm screamed at 2:13 a.m. A van had gone out for an emergency insulin run. Its signal stuttered, then vanished in a dead zone under an overpass. Our backup sensors showed a temperature creep. 10,000 vials, hours from spoilage, patients scheduled at dawn. I called the driver, no answer. I called Thiago straight to voicemail. The city outside my office window looked like a dark sea with lights for stars. The old panic, fast and hot, rose in my throat. I ran the street maps in my head, the way I used to run alleys where cameras died, where gangs patrolled, where a person could disappear. The GPS had last pinged near a shuttered warehouse by the river, the kind of place stolen bikes went to be reborn. I grabbed keys. Jairo stepped in front of me with a look that said, "Don't be an idiot alone." "I'm driving," he said, and I didn't argue. Rain turned the road into a ribbon of mercury. We killed headlights a block away. A sliver of light bled under the warehouse door. Voices floated gloating, hurried, wrong. I recognized one, and my stomach fell like an elevator. "Thiago." I wanted it not to be true so badly that my bones rebelled. Through a crack, I saw our van, our precious blue doors open, a portable chiller half unplugged. A man I didn't know counted bills. Thiago's jaw was tight, eyes wild. There are moments when you think of calling the police, and moments when you know you first have to save the living thing in front of you. In that room, the living thing was insulin losing its cool. We made a plan the size of a prayer. Jairo would cut the power outside. I'd slip to the van, secure the chiller, move what I could to the backup box, and if anything went wrong, we'd run like men who wanted to see another sunrise. When the building went dark, the men shouted. I slid like a memory through the side door. Up close, Thiago looked younger, like the face he'd worn before the streets carved lines. He saw me and froze. "Lucas," he whispered, more plea than name. There wasn't time for speeches. "Help me save it," I said, and tossed him a thermal mat. For 3 breathless minutes we moved like a 2-person orchestra plug pack. Strap, list, seal. It felt like holding a beating heart while running upstairs. Someone grabbed my arm. Jairo's hand was faster. A fist, a grunt, feet scrabbling. We shoved cases to the backup unit, slammed doors, and I drove the van out through the rain like I was steering my life back onto the road. Police lights filled the rear view 3 blocks later, called by a neighbor, awakened by the blackout. In the station, statements fell like stones. Thiago told the truth, between sobs, gambling debt, threats against his little sister, an offer from a competitor who knew our weak spots. He'd planned to sabotage the audit, sell our client list, take the money, run. I couldn't do it all the way, he said, staring at the floor. I couldn't watch the medicine die. By dawn, the insulin was on clinic shelves, colder than my hands, which shook harder than they had the night I first stepped into Ribeiro Logistics. The hospital's audit team arrived at 9 sharp, eyes like rulers. I could have hidden the mess. I didn't. I stood in the conference room, rain still in my hair, and told them what had happened and what I'd done to protect their patients. I laid out new safeguards to factor dispatch, route anonymization, sensor redundancies, driver check-ins that couldn't be spoofed. I told them we'd press charges against the men who had orchestrated the theft and that Thiago would face consequences too, but that he'd helped save the cargo when it counted. One of the auditors closed her binder, studied me. "We've had vendors who lied better than you. Tell the truth," she said, flat. "Patients got hurt on their watch." She glanced at the clock. "Your deliveries this morning were early." Another auditor spoke, softer. We'll put you on probation with additional oversight. Final voice, do not fail. It wasn't applause. It was oxygen. I called Daniel before sleep could claim me and told him everything. He listened without a single interruption. When I finished, shame and relief were braided in my voice. You did right, he said. Truth first, people first, systems next. That's how we're different. He paused. Mercy isn't the absence of justice, it's the presence of hope. I thought of Tiago sitting alone in a holding room with his head in his hands. I asked our lawyer to advocate for a restorative program if possible. We'd be stricter. We'd also be human. The probation months sharpened us. Drivers checked each other's vans like surgeons double scrubbing. Dispatch ran like a cathedral of quiet precision. We built a second cold room and hired an ethics and security officer who'd rather die than let a chiller drift a single degree. On the last day of the audit, the hospital board sent a single sentence: contract renewed, expanded service commencing next quarter. I closed my eyes and felt the room rock like a boat righting after a wave. We held our expansion ribbon cutting with paper cups and unshakable gratitude. Daniel came in his navy jacket. The old woman from church brought more empanadas than sanity recommended. Jairo stood in the back, arms crossed, eyes suspiciously wet. Osvaldo took a photo of the team and didn't make a single joke at my expense. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't say we won. I said we were held together. It felt truer. Then I slipped the small wooden cross into my palm and squeezed. Not for luck, just to remember the one who had found me under an overpass, long before I ever knew which way was north. I still keep Tiago's first shift badge in my desk drawer. The case against the men who paid him moved through the system with the slow drag of justice, and he took a plea that included restitution and counseling. When he finishes, he won't come back to US. Some fences aren't meant to be rebuilt the old way, but I hope he finds ground that doesn't give way. In the quiet after the storm, I realized forgiveness is not pretending nothing happened. It's refusing to let the wound define the map. People think the happy ending is the contract, the new warehouse, the clean polo shirts. That's part of it. The deeper ending is this: I didn't become the kind of man who needs someone to fail so he can feel tall. I became a man who tells the truth when it shakes the room, who prays before he runs into the dark, who remembers a time when his name felt like something borrowed. Every night, I put my keys in a bowl by the door and whisper, "We served someone today." Then I add, "Thank you," and the echo in my chest is steadier than it used to be. If you're listening because you're standing on a curb thinking no one sees you, I'm telling you as a witness, eyes are on you. Maybe not the ones you're begging for, not yet, but the one that found me finds people for a living. My life turned on a hand held out in a storm, and a long obedience in the same direction. Trucks move through this city like veins, carrying quiet lifeblood. I used to be the boy pressed against the pavement, wishing for morning. Now I help morning arrive on time. And still, before sleep, I say what I said in the basement shower the first week: thank you.